Welcome back to my channel Conquer the Fear. In this video, we are going to discuss about the two fundamental keywords, super and this. Now, this is quite important keywords because most of the developer misunderstand this keywords and also they have a wrong understanding about it. Now, if you want to level up your Java skills by understanding these particular keywords, then this is the right video. And if you are a fresher or an experienced guy, this particular keyword is most important when you're dealing with Java. Let us directly jump into the exact video. So now we'll understand what exactly this is used for and what is exactly super is used for and what are these keywords used for. Now these are the fundamental for writing the efficient object-oriented code. So especially if you're dealing with inheritance concepts, one of the OOPS concept, then this is the must video. So watch this video very carefully. Now this keyword is going to be referring to the current object. Let's say you have an object and you want to reference it, so it is going to refer to that particular current instance, so instance of that particular class on which the method or a constructor is being invoked. So in that case it is going to refer to the current instance. Now if you see here is an example over here, there is a method, the current object is there, and there is a method. So of that particular object, when you're trying to invoke, this will call the current constructor, method, or whatever. So this is going to refer to that particular instance, variable, constructor, or a variable over there. So in that case this is used. Now let's try to look at what are the different scenarios over here, or a different way where we can use this keyword over here. Now we are going to refer to the current class instance variable. Now if you have a class and you want to refer to that particular local variable, then this is the way how you can refer. Now when you have a local variable, let's say in the method parameter, or a local variable within the method, let's say, and you have the same name, that is of the name of the instance variable you have defined in the class. Now this is going to make it separately identify or explicitly refer to that specific instance. So no matter it is like in that particular method, whether as a parameter or whether as a new variable you have, local variable you have introduced, this is going to segregate or differentiate between the instance variable. So this is where when you're dealing with the variable, you can use this as a call to this particular instance variable. Now when you are trying to invoke some methods of the class, let's say the current class method, so in that case we can use. Now while this is very not mandatory, this is very optional one, but this can be explicitly used to call the another method of the same class. So there are 10 methods, let's say, and from one method you are trying to call the another method. So in that case you can simply call this. Now this is basically for improving the readability. In some cases you are trying to call this from the another method. Now let's say you are trying to invoke the current constructor, so this is called constructor chaining as well. Now let's say there are default constructor, there are one parameter constructor, two parameter constructor, and n number of parameter constructor. Now with this particular this keyword, you can, without giving the argument name of that particular constructor, you can call this particular another constructor which is in the same class itself. Now this is called constructor chaining. So this is very useful when you are trying to avoid the duplication code. So when you have multiple constructor having the very common initialization logic, then this particular keyword was the first one which will be the statement in the constructor. So this is very useful method when it comes to the constructor part. Then when you are trying to pass the current object as an argument, now this is going to be passed as a current argument. So if you are as a method or a constructor, so when a method or a constructor require this particular reference to the current instance in object, then in that case you can use that. Now although we'll look at these examples, each one of them. Also when you're trying to return that particular class instance, then you can make use of this in some method. Let's say you are trying to achieve a builder design pattern, that is one of the Java design pattern or when you're trying to design a fluent API, this can be used to allow the method chainings over there. Now I have explained you what exactly this does. Now let's go to the example and showcase you with each of these particular scenarios. Let's try to check out the first example with respect to the this keyword. Now the scenario is where you're trying to disambiguate the instance variable from the local variable. You remember we have discussed the first scenario where you're trying to identify which one is the local variable or which one is the local variable which is defined inside the method. So when a constructor or a method parameter has the same name with the instance variable, then this is used to resolve that particular ambiguity which is causing the problem. Now if you don't define this, then this is going to assign to the parameter value itself. So let's take an example. If you see the student over here, this is going to be, there will be a name here if you see, and there is an integer over here. And if you see in the constructor, I'm going to refer to this particular name. This is one of the local variable. Now if you see, this is having the same name of that particular instance variable, but just take a look at this particular this reference. Now if you take a look at this, this is going to refer to the name parameter over here, but when I click on this, it is going to refer to the instance variable over here. So this is how the difference is, and then you get the reference to that. Now let's say in the main method I'm trying to create an instance, and then I'm trying to call this. If you insert this method, display method. Now if you take a look at this, when I'm trying to add this as an alias over here, let's try to run this. Now this is going to refer to the current instance of that particular method. Now if you take a look at this, age is 20 and this, right? So this is how it is going to be referred within this particular this keyword. Let's discuss the second scenario. Let's say you want to invoke the another constructor from the same class. So this is called constructor chaining. We already discussed when you want to call another constructor of different parameter, you can use this. So now this is used for if you have some reusable logic to be called up. In that case we can use it. Now if you take a look at this, there is a box class. Now under this three attributes, now this is going to be the default constructor, but make a note of this. Before going to this, if you see, there are other constructor with one parameter, two parameter, etc. Now if you see, this has been called over here. Now I'm not calling the, I want to call the another constructor where I want to pass some default values as a dimension over there. Now if I click on this is going to call to this one over here. This is how you call the constructor chaining. Now when you call this is called the constructor chaining. So from one constructor I'm trying to call the another constructor of the same class. So this is how it is going to call it. Now if you take a look at this is going to first go to the default constructor. Now this default constructor will call the parameterized constructor, and from here it will assign the values over here. So this is how you get that particular value. Now you can also call the direct constructor of that particular parameter, or you can give the another. So based on your requirement you can create that. Now let us take an example of the third scenario. Let's say you want to pass this as an argument to one of this particular method. So in that case it will be very useful to be passed in the another class needs to operate on that particular current object. Now let's take a look at this. If you see here, there is a book class over here, the title, name, and the name. Now if you see here, there is a book title and author, and this is over here. Now if you look at this, uh, after this what I have done, I'm going to do a publish method over here. Now if you look at this, I'm going to pass this as a parameter to it. So I'm doing this as a current instance, whatever I'm getting, and passing to this particular print method. Now what happens to this particular print method, that this method will pass here, and this is going to print this particular title over here. Now this way you can pass using this. So I hope like you have never seen such examples, and very few on this YouTube you will see such kind of video where you will try to explain the in detail what exactly that this is about and the super is about. So let's check out the other example. Let's try to run this. Before that, now you see, similar to this, now this is getting called up over here. Let's take a look at the last example with respect to the this scenario. Let's say you are trying to returning the this method or a object for with the method which is going to do some method chaining over here. Let's say you are designing the Fluent API. So in this case, calculator, the result is there, and this, if you see, there is a constructor which I'm trying to refer over here. But if you take a look at this calculator, one of the add method, this is going to return the current instance. Now this is going to be one of the way where we already talked about the builder design pattern, where it is going to take that input, create that instance, assign some value, and then it is going to return the current instance. So it is going to build step by step whatever it is required. So in this way it is going to return this. Now if you take a look at this, the constructor, now this is going to be called up, and then if you see, call this particular add method, now this is going to call the constructor, the instance of this method. Now on top of that, I also have written another subtract method. Now on top of that, again, I'm doing the addition, and then I'm trying to do the subtraction, again I'm to do the addition. So in this way you can chain it, and then you can call. So in this way the builder pattern is achieved. So you can call the method chaining in this way. So you can perform n number of times. Let's say you want to do repeated steps over here. So in this case, this is quite very useful when you're dealing with this, and this is going to be very very handy in this case. I hope I was able to explain you all the scenarios, all the usage of this, how it can be used, where exactly it used. So in case of instance variable, in case of constructor, in case of method argument, in case of return type, in case of builder design pattern. So in this case, these are the scenarios where you can make use of this. Let's try to take an example of super. Now against to the this keyword, the super is going to be the reference that is going to be referring to the immediate parent class. So let's say you have a parent class and a child class, and you want to refer the any of this particular constructor, variable, etc. in the parent class. So you're going to make use of the super keyword. So this is going to make the current object superclass reference over there. Now if you take a look, there is a parent class, and the child class is going to extend the parent class. Now if you see from the child class, if I'm calling the super, then this is going to call the superclass variable, the method, or a constructor. So in that case you can use this particular super keyword. Now let's try to see what exactly or where exactly the super can be made applicable and where you can use it in your application. So let's say you want to refer your superclass instance variable. Now you have a subclass which is having the parent class. So in that case, let's say you want to have a subclass instance variable with the same name that is defined in the parent class, that is of the superclass. So if you want to explicitly refer to the superclass instance variable, then in that case you have to make use of this super and then the instance variable. So in that case it will be invoking that particular super class instance variable. Now let's say you want to call the superclass method. Now when you have this particular subclass overriding in that particular method from a superclass, and you call super and invoking that overridden method with that particular superclass method, then you will definitely will be calling the superclass. I will give you the examples and scenarios in a few seconds, but this is how it works when it comes to methods. Now let's say you're trying to invoke with the constructor. Let's say you want to invoke the superclass constructor. Now you make use of this super with or without the argument based on the argument constructor you have defined. So you can call the constructor for the immediate superclass. Now this is very very important when you want to properly initialize an inherited part of the object. Let's say super is going to be the very first statement in the subclass. If you don't specify explicitly or you this is the constructor, then the Java is going to implicitly add this super, that is going to be the no argument constructor by default as the first statement. So even if you don't specify, super or this is going to be the super one will be called up at any one, at any cost, the super constructor over here. Now let's try to check out the examples scenarios over here. Now if you take a look at the scenario one with respect to the super keyword, now you are trying to access the superclass variable with the name which is going to be same as the existing in the superclass and the subclass. Now if you see, there is a vehicle, it has got the type as a variable name, and I've assigned some value over here. Now what I do, I have extended this, I've created my own string type over here. Now this is going to hide the type reference that is defined in the vehicle. Now same is with the max speed as well. Now this is going to hide the variable over there, but let's see how it is going to be dealing with the implicit when the constructor is there. So we'll see how it is going to be called up over here. Now if you take a look at this, so new car is there. Now when you try to call this particular method over here, now this is the, as we already spoke about, this is going to be the very first test statement that is going to be added in the default constructor. So whether you specify this or not, ideally it is very good to specify as a best practices, but if you don't specify, this is going to be the super thing. Now if you see here, this is going to be of type this one, so this is going to refer to the car type only. So we earlier discussed what exactly this is going to refer. Now if you see super over here, now if I click on this, this is going to refer to the vehicle, and if I click on this particular this, it is going to refer to the vehicle, that is class, that is going to be the child class. So this is how it is going to refer those particular value, and same is the case with the max speed of this. So this is going to refer over there. Let us try to take an example of the second scenario. Let's say you want to invoke the overridden methods of a superclass method. Now this is going to allow the subclass to extend or modify the behavior which is inherited from the method, but still if you are trying to leverage that particular superclass, then you can make use of this superclass super method to call that particular implementation. Now you have this particular animal. Now you have a make sound method implementation written over here. Similarly, I have extended the dog and I'm trying to make a sound of this. Now if you see, I've created an instance of dog over here and trying to make a sound of this. Now if you see, just make a note of here, I am trying to, in this particular sound, I am trying to call the super constructor over here. Now if you see, this is calling the super class method over here, sorry, method. So when I call this, this is going to be called up. Now let me try to run this and show you. Now if you see, the animal is being called up over here at the as a method over here, and then it is going to bark it. So first it is going to call the super class method, and then it is going to call this particular thing. Now let's take an example of the third scenario. Here if you see, I'm trying to invoke the constructor of this superclass. So this is one of the essential way to call this particular superclass. So if you are trying to initialize it before the subclass does some its own initialization, so in that case, if you want to achieve that functionality, you can use this. Now let's take an example. Person is here with the name and this where. Now if you take a look, person is in constructor is written over here, and I'm trying to extend the employee over here, and I have one attribute over here. Now before this, if you see, in this constructor of employee, the extended the subclass, I'm trying to call this super. Now this is going to do, even before this particular subclass is initialized or does some activity, this is going to first go to the superclass. It is going to initialize this, it is going to print this, and then again it is going to come back over here and do the assignment to this and print this. Now this is how it is going to. Now I've created an employee over here. Now if you see, first it will go here this employee, then it will go from here, and then ultimately it will print it. So if you see, and ultimately if I'm calling this, this will be calling that. So let's try to run this. Now you see, the parent, the person constructor is called, the employee constructor is called, and then the employee name. So this is how it is going to be called up over here. So the person, this is the very first thing will be called up. Let's take a look at the last example. Now this is going to be a scenario number 4 where I'm trying to call the super class constructor, that is going to be the no argument constructor. So it can be implicit or an explicit, we'll discuss. So let's say if you have a super class and which has got no argument constructor, now you don't need to explicitly call the super, because this is going to be added by the compiler, which I already told you. So if you don't specify this super or this, then the super will be called by the constructor. And if you let's say you have some superclass which has got some parameterized constructor and the no argument constructor, you must explicitly call the one argument constructor, that is one of the superclass parameters. So you have to make use of this super. So in that case, this is the variation. So if you have the default constructor or not, that based on that it depends on it, the Java compiler gives you a way out to call it. Now I have a shape over here, and then if you see I have the parameterized constructor over here. Now if you take a look at this, the circle, if you see I'm trying to call this superclass, then now in this case this is going to be a parameterized constructor. Now there is the reason there is no default constructor over here, that is the reason I had to explicitly call this. Now if I am not, I wanted to explicitly call this, then I have to remove this, or either I have to add this constructor that is going to be the default constructor, and hence it will be called up. So in only in that case it can be called up. So if the default constructor is there, then you can call it directly, or else it will be called implicitly only if it is a default constructor. And if there is a no default constructor, the parameterized constructor is defined instead of the default one, then you have to make the call explicitly how it is done over here. Let's try to compare the keywords this with the super. Now we already discussed what are these particular two keywords. Now this is going to be the current instance, and this is going to be the parent instance. Now when usage wise you are trying to access variable members, the methods of the current class itself, or to call the current class constructor as well. So now in this way you're trying to access the parent class variables, constructor, etc. over here. Now in the context, this is majorly used when you're trying to refer its own class members, or in the super class it is it is going to be for the super keyword when you want to try to refer to the super class members. Now you can call the constructor using this or this argument. So based on your constructor definition, you must use this. So this must be the first statement. So when you're trying to define that particular constructor, now in this case super, now this should be the first statement when you're trying to call the super class over there, so from the subclass. So in this case, so this should be taken care. Now when you're comparing it with the ambiguity, now this is going to resolve the ambiguity between your local instance variable and the local variable. So now when it comes to ambiguity between this particular superclass and the subclass, the name of that particular method, variable, so this is going to give you the clarity of whether it is a superclass or a subclass variable or a method. Now when you are dealing with the static context, so this particular you cannot have a static method, or you cannot have a static block that is as a this reference, because that is a static that is only belonging to the class and not the instance. Now this is going to refer to the object, not to the class. Now same is the case with the static when you're dealing with super. So you cannot have a static method or a static block when you're dealing with the super. So you have to refer to when you want to refer to the current instance of the parent class. So that is not the case. So in this case you have to be very careful when you're dealing with the static things. Now, as an overall, I hope I was able to explain you what exactly this, along with the scenario. Along with that, I have explained you what is super, how it is different from super, and this, how are the different scenarios. So we have explained in details with the code example. I hope if this video was very helpful, and it is very helpful when you're trying to attend an interview, because this is one of the important interview question when the interviewer asks, especially for the freshers and the experience, because this is the basic and the fundamental keyword. Now if this video was helpful, please share it with the needy people. Also don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. Thank you for watching.